Edu. And Percy Bergkamp. Oh, and Arsenal have walked it in through Patrick Vieira.
Tremendous, absolutely sublime football. And what a finish to go with it.
It's a joy to welcome a gent who as a player won World Cup and Euro titles with France, a Premier League with Arsenal's legendary Invincibles. As a manager, he broke through in the United States with NYCFC via Nice and has now arrived in that South London cauldron, Selhurst Park, revelling in life as the manager of the magical Crystal Palace. Best Pat since McAfee. Oh, Mr. Patrick Vieira, ça va?
Ça va, Rog?
Patrick, anyone who saw you as a player remembers an unstoppable force. A gent who could pick opponents apart with passes, often preferred just to run right over them. And you played for an incredible group of managers, Fabio Capello, Arsene Wenger, Roberto Mancini and more. Now you're a manager. Who was the one you learnt the greatest lesson from, and what was that lesson?
I will have to say Arsene Wenger, because spending 9 years with him, and I think this is where I play my best football. And Arsene was really important to me because he made me grow up as a man and he made me grow up as a player as well. And what I really took from him is his calmness, the way he's communicated with me, with all the players, his positiveness, and the way that he's delivering those messages to the players. He's been really truth to me about how I need to grow. You know, all the conversation, all the mistakes that I had make on the field, he helped me to manage those difficult situations I went through. And this is something that I try to use today with the players that I'm working with.
Palace have so many players who live to express themselves. The inimitable dagger that is Zaha, the cunning of Eze, skill-kissed Elise. What's the most important skill as a manager to get the best out of them as jazz improvisers while making sure that they play within the collective, within your system?
It's about being clear with their role and responsibility. It's about make them understand what this game is all about. It's not about just your individual talent. Of course, it's more easy when you have that talent, but that talent is nothing if you're not playing with the players around you, if you don't play as a team. So the communication and the vision of the game that I have is really important to make them understand our collective game will allow the individual talent to shine, and if they understand that we will be in a good place to work after on the details to be more competitive, I would say.
We speak after Palace have unfurled a series of gritty performances against teams like Manchester United and Newcastle. Palace almost returning to basics with some true defensive defiance. How hard is it for a team like Palace to compete in this modern footballing reality in which the Big Six, now a Big Seven really, are spending and buying players at a completely different level?
I think he make it really difficult for us and for a lot of teams in the Premier League to compete against those top 7. But like Palace, we in our football club have the passion and we have a good organization. We have people who care about this football club. So those values are really important for us to keep, and those values will help us to compete against those 7-8 teams in the Premier League. Of course, we are not in the same level of scouting players than the top 6-7 teams in the Premier League, but like we did with Marc Guéhi, with Michael Olise, we can identify those young special talent early ages and we can bring them to our football club and we can work with them and they can compete at that level. Our togetherness, our team spirit, I will say, will allow us to compete the way we did against Newcastle and against, of course, United.
You talk about special young talents, and one of the joys of 2023, and I may be biased, has been watching Chris Richards become the finest Premier League player in Alabama history. And Chris made a belated first start after injury, but wasted no time chasing down Anthony. And he seems to revel in the Premier League spotlight. Tell us about Chris from the inside, Patrick. What do you see as his strengths and what does he need to work on?
Listen, when he was at Bayern, we saw potential there. Of course, when you look at his record, he had a couple of injuries, but we were quite really impressed with his defensive work. Because the way we want to play the game, we're asking our back four, our central back, to be quite really good on the ball, and Chris technically can play. We decided to bring him to the football club, and he's been really unlucky with the injuries because he was quite really challenging. He had a couple of steps back, but now he's in a really good place. He's been training with the first team the last 6-7 weeks, and he had those 2 games that he played, and he showed all his potential. Now the challenge for me and for him is to maintain that level.
You've got real insight into the American player, their talents, their mental mindset. Are you still encountering a stigma among coaches who haven't been exposed to American players? And is any part of that stigma still fair in any way?
In Germany, I think they understood quicker than anybody else that there is a proper talent in the US. And I think in the UK here, the US market will be a market that we have to go as soon as possible to bring those players because there is quality there. And hopefully we will bring more than one Richards in our football club in the near future because there is a potential there. The game is growing up. I'm still following the MLS quite often, and there's some really, really good players who can come in England or in Europe and to do really well.
How good can Chris Richards be?
I think it will be how much he will be prepared to sacrifice himself to get to the top. He's an international player. He is really smart. He's defending really well. Chris is part of those defenders who still like to defend. He will put his head where other people will put their foot. He's a proper defender. If he manages to stay out of injuries, if he's making the sacrifice around himself to keep improving himself, he will be a good add to the US national team.
Last one for you, Patrick. If this Arsenal team played your current Invincibles, your 2003-4 team of you, Thierry Henry and Dennis Bergkamp, what would the score be? Who would win?
I think the Invincible will win because we have Bergkamp and Thierry Henry, of course.
Oh, even in your 40s, you still fancy it?
Yes.
Subscribe here for more Men in Blazers videos and courage.